what in the world is going on with Michigan, Joel? I mean, how does this situation play itself out now? The Wolverines, give credit to the Badgers for not having played Wisconsin in a while, but that was just a thorough beatdown. It doesn't look like Michigan knows what in the world is going on. They're 1-3. How does this situation end for Michigan? Where are we headed?
I mean, I don't think it ends very, very well. I mean, I was really, I don't know how skeptical is the right word, about the appetite that ADs would have around the country to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I talked about
that.
that. I just talked about it in the second hour of the show. I said I thought that, given the challenges of COVID, I didn't think there'd be a lot of guys getting fired, and obviously that changed with South Carolina.
Right. So Muschamp, he gets the bag, and I think his number, you might know, I think his number is like 13 or 14 million.
Yeah, nearly 15 million bucks.
So yeah, it's a big number, and Jim's is not going to be that high. Remember, after this season, he's only got 1 year left on his contract.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it ends. That's a mess, right? Do you want to fire him? He is Michigan, right? I mean, and they certainly put all their chips in the middle of the table, the Jim Harbaugh table, and so maybe they mutually part. I'm not totally sure how that's going to end, but it's certainly not working, and I don't even have a great idea of what's wrong. I mean, I watched their first game on film prepping for their second game of the year, which I did, and I was like, boy, this team looks really good. They run the ball powerfully. Their quarterback looked good. Their wide receivers looked fast. Their defense looked good. And they've just gone completely the wrong direction. So I don't know if it's fixable. I think that this is a really odd year. And after a season like this, in particular with the way that he's performed against Ohio State, namely, I think people are going to be, kind of at the doors, if you will, and hoping that he is shown the door after the year.
So does he get fired, or do you think he just decides to walk away? I mean, does Michigan have
that's why I was kind of beating around the bush. Like, I don't know if they would they fire him? That's not a great look, right? I mean, again, because he was the Michigan savior. He's a Michigan guy. His dad coach was Schembechler. He played for Schembechler. Like, is that a guy that you just want to can? I don't know if that's the way to go, but I could also see a guy like Jim saying, hey, listen, I love this university enough to come to the agreement that, like, hey, this is not working and let's mutually part. I could see that happening too. I think with him, everything's on the table.
But you would be very surprised if he was back as the head coach of Michigan next year at this point.
I don't know. I don't know, Clay. That's a great question. I'll be really frank with you. I won't be surprised at any outcome in Michigan. I won't be surprised if he's fired. I won't be surprised if he walks away. I won't be surprised if they mutually part. And I won't be surprised if he's back next year. I think everything is on the table there, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
What do you think South Carolina? Well, what would Michigan do if Harbaugh's not there? I mean, he was their savior. He was supposed to be their Urban Meyer. He was supposed to be their Nick Saban. I don't know who they could hire that in any way would be like a guy that Michigan Wolverine fans, and look, my wife's an alum, and so I hear a lot from Michigan fans. She's from Michigan. I can't think of anybody that they could hire that would inspire an immediate excitement, right? I don't know how that happens because the expectations were just so high for him. He seemed like the perfect fit. I don't even know what direction they go.
I don't either. Do you? I know this sounds crazy, but do you go throw a bag of money at Matt Rule at the Carolina Panthers? Does that inspire a little bit of confidence? If you're looking at college coaches, I think that three names that jump out to me are Jeff Hafley at Boston College, who's done a great job in his first year, albeit it's his first year. Luke Fickell, who's obviously done a great job at Cincinnati. And then Steve Sarkisian. I mean, there's probably other really good candidates. I think those are three of the best.
We're talking to Joel Klatt. All right, so what happens with Muschamp at South Carolina? I talked about this in the last hour on the show. I said it's almost like the Band-Aid's ripped off now because once one school decides they can pay $15 million for somebody not to coach, then a lot of other big-name schools, their boosters look around, and I guarantee you what they say because I know how those conversations work, and you do too. Well, South Carolina did it. It's not like these are, you got a bunch of Buddy Garrity's for people out there who are Friday Night Lights fans. The boosters sit around and say, well, I understand you're arguing we can't make this move because of COVID, But does South Carolina have more money than we do? Why can South Carolina do it and we can't? So I tend to think this could open up other potential jobs. But what does South Carolina do? Is Hugh Freeze the fit to you? What do you expect?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but yeah, I mean, is it Hugh Freeze? Like, do you bring him back in the fold? I guess that's it. But here's the other question. And listen, someone's going to take it because look at the amount of money that's being thrown around. I mean, hell, South Carolina could call me. I'll probably take the job. You're paying Will Muschamp $15 million to sit on his couch.
By the way, I said I would love to get fired and get paid that much money to not have to do anything at some point in time.
Oh, it's unbelievable. But let me just throw this out there, and I'm not trying to disparage, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of reality. Steve Spurrier went 11-2. 3 consecutive years in 2011, 12, and 13, right? And that's the height of South Carolina football, period.
Yep.
In their history, they only have one other double-digit win season. So I hate to say it this way, but because I don't want anyone to settle for mediocrity, but what is South Carolina? Who's taking that job and what are they going to compete with Florida and Georgia and Tennessee?
Well, it's not only that. Just in the state right now, Clemson has never been higher. So, you not only have to compete in a very difficult SEC East with, like you mentioned, Georgia and Florida and Tennessee, who all have substantially more money and history, but in your small state, one of the greatest rivalries in all of college football is Clemson, South Carolina, and Clemson has never been higher than they are right now. And so you're talking about years and years before you would be able to have anywhere near the talent level as just Clemson does.
I think that I understand what they were doing because I think that the offense has continually gotten worse. And then once you saw that the defense was getting worse, which is supposed to be Muschamp's,
signature
bread and butter, I think, and so you're like, okay, this isn't working. We need to move on. But the problem is what? Okay, so you're going to spend $15 million for him not to coach. And then what? Who's taking that job? I'm sorry, but Clay, I think it's absolutely crazy for any coach that has actual standards, and that meaning hey, I want to go to a place where I can win the conference, I can compete to go to the playoff. Why would you go to South Carolina? No job that's second in their own state is any good. Sorry. I'm sorry, but that is absolute truth, and it's truth across college football. Just throw them out there. Throw them out there, right? Hey, is Michigan State a better job than Michigan? No. Washington State or Washington? Nope. You go right through it. Iowa State or Iowa? Nope. I guess Matt Campbell would be one of the guys you go after, but why would Matt Campbell go and be in the same position he's in at Iowa State at South Carolina? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I think Matt Campbell is probably a guy that Michigan will look at if they want to make a change. But, I know that sounds harsh, man, but that's kind of the reality of college football.
We're talking to Joel Klatt. Go follow him on Twitter at Joel Klatt. You can see him dancing on Twitter this weekend as well as we roll into the start of the new week. All right, so who should be the Heisman Trophy winner right now? If we had to vote right now, to me it's an easy call. It's Kyle Trask. I think he's the best player in college football right now. I don't know about you, but I think ultimately the Heisman Trophy is going to be decided probably in the SEC championship game between Mac Jones and between Kyle Trask, because I think they're going to play there. And let me explain why, and then I'm curious what you think. Because I don't think Justin Fields is going to get to play that many games, as good as he is. And I don't think he's going to get to play that many big games because Michigan's not any good. Penn State's not any good. Indiana, the game that you guys have this weekend, may be the biggest regular season game, probably is, that Ohio State's going to play. And they're a 3-touchdown favorite in that game, according to Vegas. Meanwhile, Trevor Lawrence has missed several games. Maybe he could come back and get into the mix. But I think if you look at the schedule ahead for Florida, schedule ahead for Alabama, big numbers coming from Mac Jones and from Kyle Trask, and they will have that big signature game against each other in the SEC championship. What say you?
I think that's a decent argument. I don't think that it's correct, but I mean, if Trask wins out, I think that he probably wins the Heisman. So let me just say that because his volume of numbers in your analysis, yes, it would trump kind of a minimum volume that Fields would probably have. And I think that you're right when you say Fields doesn't have a lot of big games. The problem is that if Alabama beats Florida, Florida is going to have 2 losses, and Nebraska is not going to win the Heisman Trophy, even if his numbers are absolutely insane. And I don't think voters are going to vote for Mac Jones because as good of his numbers are, you can't, with a straight face, argue that he's even the best player on his own team or his own offense, right? And while the other guys might not have the numbers to equate to giving them the Heisman Trophy, that's when all of a sudden they start looking around, and that's when you look at a guy like Justin Fields, and then the argument becomes he's clearly the best player on one of the best teams in the country. He's a quarterback, and Clay, and I don't think Heisman voters are going to let this just fall by the wayside. He's a big reason why we're even playing college football to begin with, period, across the country, but certainly in the Big Ten. And so his contributions off the field might trump kind of a Mac Jones style volume of numbers, SEC championship, undefeated season. And that's just kind of the way that I see it. I mean, if you're asking me, I've got a ballot in front of me and I've got to check a box of like who's the best college football player in the nation, and I see Mac Jones and Justin Fields, it's going to be really hard for me to check the box Mac Jones. It just is. I'm sorry, but it is. Because we know that Justin Fields is a better player than him, and if he's got requisite numbers, at least, I think a lot of people will think back to what he did in the offseason to bring the sport back, and they'll also look at the fact that Mac Jones might not even be the best player on his own offense.
Joel Klatt, you're wrong, but we'll talk to you next week and see how this continues to break out.
You know what? You know how I know I might be wrong is that Derrick Henry won the Heisman over Christian McCaffrey. That's how I know I might be wrong, because who knows what goes on down there, man, with those ballots.
Well, it's possible that the SEC votes could end up canceling each other out, and you might be right that Justin Fields ends up getting, a more substantial number. It is kind of funny. You have our own electoral college when it comes to the Heisman Trophy.